The Regent's Reign, Chapter 2, Aftermath. The next few weeks were madness. Though not much structural damage had been done by Morgana and Morgause during their occupation, the toll was palpable all the same. At least 7 servants and 3 townsfolk had been killed in the slaughter in the courtyard, including the steward. 3 days after they retook the castle, the council named Arthur Prince Regent. Uther's condition had not improved. In fact, one could say that him screaming about Morgana when Merlin entered the room behind Gaius was a sign that he was getting worse. Merlin did not go anywhere near him after that encounter. Gwen set to caring for Uther. Few went near the king after Arthur was named regent. It was a small ceremony, nothing like what Arthur's coronation would be. That was being quietly planned as well. No one thought Uther would live out the year, though no one said it aloud. They were all too busy to really think about it. Winter was coming, and the harvest had been delayed by the coup. That was not the only problem for the kingdoms. Currently, there was a mess happening in Estir. Not only had Morgause used Senred's army for her plot, but the bigger issue was that King Senred was dead. Without a king, as Senred had been the only living member of his family, Estir was falling into chaos. It was part of the reason Arthur was poring over the particular parchment he was reading so intently. Gawain had been the one to point it out to him. Not that he hadn't been superficially aware and annoyed by the fact that in all technicality, Merlin owed her allegiance to the ruler of Estir, since she had been born there. The men he'd knighted before their harebrained scheme to take back Camelot, that he'd been half convinced would kill them all, had been the greatest boon over the last month or so. The story of their knighting was still the talk of the town and Citadel alike. It had earned them something of a quaint nickname, the Knights of the Round Table. There were still several who muttered about commoner knights, but after Lancelot and Gawain were unleashed on the training field alongside Ellian, Percival, and Leon, people stopped questioning why these men had been chosen. But one person remained unrewarded, and Arthur had been trying to figure out how to reward her. He'd passed a few ideas by the round table. That was when Gawain pointed out that Merlin was not a citizen of Camelot. She had never petitioned for it, though she could have. That made Arthur a little nervous. But she deserved that, and he could not do more until she was a citizen of his kingdom. He could not make her a lady of his court, as he fully intended to, without this first step. He looked up as the door opened. Gawain was grinning. Arthur had to admit that he looked good in knight's armor, even if his hair remained a mess. All his new knights wore the armor and cloak well. "Well?" Arthur asked. "Lancelot's bringing her up. Gaius will be here in a minute," he said, polishing an apple on his cloak before taking a bite. "Still not sure why you wanted this to be a private thing. Isn't this sort of thing usually done in front of the court?" he asked around his mouthful. "Merlin hates being the center of attention. She stammers and gets shy, unless she is standing up for someone. Then I'm pretty sure she forgets there are other people in the room. Remind me to tell you what happened when my father summoned the Witchfinder." "The Witchfinder? I've heard of him. Evil old bastard. Merlin went toe-to-toe with him," Gawain said, something protective flashing in his eyes. "And won? Story for another time," Arthur said as a soft knock sounded on the door. Gaius entered, raising an eyebrow. "Lovely. As a member of the council, I need you to sign this, please," he said, holding out the parchment. Gaius blinked and smiled, heading over to the desk and holding out a hand for the quill. There was another knock on the door. Gaius cast drying sand over his signature and handed the parchment back to Arthur. The door opened to Lancelot, followed by Merlin. "What's going on here?" she asked, crossing her arms, her eyebrows raised. Gawain leaned against the wall, munching on his apple. Lancelot stood in the doorway. "I have been thinking for a while now how best to reward you for all you've done," Arthur began. Arthur, you know I don't do anything for a reward, Merlin interrupted. No, but you kept me alive. Kept all of us alive, not to mention what you've done for Camelot. Practically everyone knew that Lancelot and Merlin were the ones who had spilled the cup. Arthur. No, my turn. You have done far too much for Camelot, and for me, to go unrewarded. The reward I got last time went so well for everyone, she joked, making both Arthur and Gaius laugh. Merlin, can you just shut up for a minute and let me make you a free citizen of Camelot? Arthur asked. Merlin froze. What? She asked, sounding a bit breathless. Arthur held out the parchment. The rest of the council has already signed it. I just needed Gaius to sign it, and then I need to seal it, he said, tipping a careful measure of red wax onto the parchment and pressing the seal ring he now wore alongside his mother's ring into the wax. Merlin let out a strangled noise, and Arthur looked up in time to see her burst into tears. He rushed to her, pulling her into his arms. Why are you crying? Never thought this would happen, she muttered. It's the least I can do. Literally, Arthur assured. It really is, Gawain snarked. Arthur rolled his eyes at his knight and let Merlin bury her face in his shoulder.